As someone who has played the game consistently for the past 2 years, went from not clearing floor 11 to 36 starring consistently and being able to beat Fearless in Stygian Onslaught. Not this one though, the last one, this one is just a little bit Anyway, to do that I had to learn a lot about the game and the meta, so I could catch up. With Notcry coming soon, I want to document how the meta has developed these past 2 years, so when we're in late 6.x patches, we can see just how much one version changed how we tackle the endgame. Well done. 2 years ago was the release of Fontaine, and with Fontaine the first meta-defining character was Neuvillette. Even without a good team, he could still do more damage than most other characters, so it became normal to use him to clear one side of the Abyss. He released at a time where the Abyss was way easier than it is now, not to mention that Tether and Stygian Onslaught weren't a thing back then, so you could almost always find somebody clear with a decent team on one half, and Neuvillette and no other supports on the other. Of course, if Neuvillette was this broken, the Archon had to be as strong as him. And Furina did not disappoint. Furina is one, if not the best support even today. Apart from her insane damage bonus buff, her damage is great as well, so if a team had a healer or could fit in a healer, they would benefit a lot from slotting Furina in. So, with just these two characters, the meta already changed from Sumeru's reaction-based teams to something closer to hyper-carry teams. The best team by far included Neuvillette and Furina. It kind of became a joke, but the best 10 teams would be Neuvillette, Furina, and then 2 random characters. Basically, Fontaine just power crept everything, but not necessarily in a bad way. The difference wasn't that high, and Furina was a support, so the other top DPS characters benefited a lot. The patch after Furina, we also got Chevreuse. She basically created a new archetype that Electro and Pyro characters could use. Even though she is a 4-star, she was a great alternative to the Anemo slot in hyper carry teams. So teams like Raiden Hyper or Mono Pyro teams could now use Chevreuse instead of Kazuha and still clear Abyss with ease. With the release of Xianyun, we got our first plunge buffer in the game. Since the only good plunge character at the time was Shao, he finally got his best team. But Xianyun also brought one of the first wheelchair teams in the game. Since she could enable any character to plunge, characters like Diluc and Hutao could now just use her and Furina to vape every plunge, but if you had C6 Bennett, any character could now pyro plunge. So if you wanted to clear with something like Dodgy DPS, now you could somewhat easily. A few patches later, we finally got one of the most hyped characters of the region. Arlecchino became the best pyro DPS and effectively the second best DPS in the game. Some would argue between her and Hutao, and I still believe in my heart that Hutao was the better one of them. A lot of things made Arlecchino better in practice. Her front-loaded damage, her ease of use, her team options, and the fact that she didn't share a lot of characters with Neuvillette made her the best character for the other half. During the 4.x patches, we also saw the small revival of the Geo element with Navi and Shiori, but on the grand scheme of things, nothing really changed. Natlan came with a lot of hype behind it. We got new mechanics, new characters, and most importantly, a new very good support set. If you had the Natlan character, now you could give your team Scroll for 40% damage bonus effectively for free. Anyway, 5.0 came with Mualani, Kinich, and Kachina. And considering 2 of them were DPS characters and Kachina was a Geo sub DPS, now them being that broken, this version didn't really change anything. However, Mualani was a great addition to speedrunning. Just search something like Mualani 5.0 clear and look at those runs, they're honestly insane. Next patch, Xilonen came out, and we finally had a good Geo unit. Not because she was Geo, but because she was effectively a second Kazuha that could heal your team instead of grouping your enemies. She made a lot of teams that had weird setups way easier to play, since her shred is longer. But that wouldn't make her shine until 5.3 with the release of both Mavuika and Citlali. Mavuika dethroned Neuvillette as the best DPS in the game. Of course, if you didn't have her best team, she was weaker, but she had way more damage than what would be considered a balanced DPS character. Also, most players couldn't get her best team, since one of her best supports was on the same banner as her. Some of you might remember that melt teams weren't really that good, so why is Citlali one of Mavuika's best supports? Well, Citlali basically revived melt and made it way easier to use. With Xilonen as well, melt setups were way easier to do, and Citlali provided a lot for the team. A shred, a damage bonus from scroll, attack percent from TDS, she even had a shield in case you needed one. Citlali was so good that now some pyro teams could use Citlali instead of their Hydra unit. Instead of vaping their hits, they could melt them for even more damage. 2 patches later, we also got Varesa, a second DPS character with numbers close to Mavuika's, and she kinda came out of nowhere. The fact that she completely out DPS's the other electro carries showed that power creep was becoming a noticeable problem in Genshin. Same patch, we also got Xianyun, which was a welcome addition. Nobody would hate a second Bennett. In 5.6, we got Escoffier. If you didn't think Genshin had power creep, Escoffier is the most broken support by far, considering you want to play freeze. The amount of utility that she gives isn't even balanced. She heals, she shreds, and she does a lot of damage. Now some people would ask, is she healthy to the game? Probably not. However, freeze was the thing for like 3 years before her release, so she was a welcome addition. Next patch we also got Skirk. As other post-Mavuika DPS characters, her numbers were way higher than other older characters. The fact that she is locked into freeze doesn't really make up for that, but because of that, she also became the best cryo DPS. Anyway, let's take a small break from characters, and let's talk more about the endgame and how it evolved. At the start of Genshin, the only endgame was Abyss. Now the fact that Imaginarium got added in 4.7 didn't really change what players needed to get to beat the endgame. The difference in how invested your teams must be to clear Abyss and Theater is just too great, so even though it is considered an endgame game mode, it isn't really relevant to the meta. Getting more into Abyss and its development over the years, in Fontaine, the chamber started to have more and more HP, but not enough as to make it so you couldn't clear with all their teams. However, this trend followed into Natlan, and Natlan also added new mechanics that you have to play around, making so you needed way more investment on your characters. Just look at this. The HP difference between 4.0 and 4.8 is 5 million. The difference between 5.0 and 5.8 is 7 million. You might be thinking, but Adi, 2 million over the span of 1 year isn't that big of a deal. However, that's not the problem. The problem is that the difference between 4.0 and 5.8 is 12 million. Fontaine patches didn't even have that much HP in Abyss. This is the main reason newer characters are way better than older ones. They just have to be. Things that didn't get upgrades can barely clear, if even that. And most of the time, it's just because of their scaling, not because of a new mechanic they can't deal with. However, with the release of Stygian Onslaught, I'm hoping they will stop just blindly increasing HP and focus on making Fearless the new hardest game mode. Stygian Onslaught's release also changed how most players viewed the endgame. The main difference between Stygian and Abyss is that you need 3 teams, an entire 4 more characters than Abyss, that can deal with that version's boss mechanics. It basically made DPS characters that don't need popular supports better to pull, made specialized supports better to pull, more 4 stars are relevant, and since it's just single target, it made AoE characters worse. Overall, Stygian is a good addition to the game, especially considering how you're basically guaranteed to get the primodes, even though you might not have a well-built account. So don't feel bad if you can't clear the harder difficulties. Anyway, theoretically, I should also talk about 5.8 in Ineffa, but since right now she's just an Electro sub DPS that also changes Electro charge a little bit, even though she is good, she isn't really meta. This will probably change with Notcry, since she teases Notcry's gimmick of reworking reactions. But anyway, this was it for the video. Let me know in the comments if I missed something. If you want, you can also tell me what you think Notcry is going to bring us. I personally am hoping for a wave buff, but yeah. Don't forget to like and sub if you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time.